everybody. Welcome to Jenny Dial and author interviews with busy bookstores. Haven't done one for a little bit, but I've got a special author for you. He writes. We were just talking before we went on camera, and my goodness, he's busy and he's got some really, really great books. His name is Jack Taylor, and he is from Vancouver, Canada. And I met him through a friend. I'd done some mock-ups for him and some design work for his books. But his stories are really amazing. His book covers I'm a little jealous, Jack, because I didn't get to do them, but they're really phenomenal. And we're going to just start talking about him and his writing and what he's up to, what he's planning. And actually, I hadn't thought about this, but it just popped in my head, Jack. What was the first book you ever published? Do you remember?
The first book I published was called One Last Wave. We'd come back from Kenya, and my daughters and I were thinking back, what was life like? And I tried to challenge myself. So what's the hardest thing to write? If I wrote as a first person present female, through my daughter's eyes, my adventures over 18 years through their eyes as female, that would be a good challenge for me. So that's what got me writing. And when I finished the first one, people who read it said, "You can't stop here." So I just kept writing. So that was.
Now, did you publish that? Did you publish that as an indie author, or did you publish that?
I published it through a publisher. I had entered a contest and it did well. And so that got me rolling because it had good reviews. And with people telling me I had to keep going, I just kept going. So about one a year, I just keep cranking them out.
Okay, well, I was so rude. I asked you that question right away because I was afraid it was going to get popped out of my head and I would forget it. But please go ahead and give us a little bio about you and what you're up to, because you have another job besides writing books, right? If I'm not mistaken, but you can go ahead and explain.
Yeah, I have a few jobs. I'm credentialed as a marriage coach. So my latest book is called When Ministry and Marriage Collide. And the conflict between working in a ministry, nonprofit, mission, church, whatever organization, when you're in that leadership position and you're married and the conflicts that arise. So I'm a credentialed marriage coach. So that's where that book came out of. That's one of my jobs. I also have a job working with leaders in Africa from 9 different countries. I was there for 18 years, and my son runs an organization out of Rwanda for leaders getting their master's degree. So I teach and facilitate that. So the whole area of leadership, I'm involved in that, marriage, writing, all those type of things. Yes.
Wow. You've been busy for many, many years. I can take it.
45 years ago, I started doing marriage or leadership, all those things. Yes.
How did you land up in Canada?
Well, I was actually born here, but my parents went down to Ecuador and we lived in the jungles down there, taking the place of some missionaries who had been martyred, doing some stuff. And then we were there a while, went up to Texas and Mexico. And then in my teens, we came up to Canada and I got married here. Then we went to Kenya for 18 years after I got married. My kids were raised there, and then came back and took up some work in ministry here. I've started 9 nonprofits and been involved in faith organizations. So lots of different things that got me going.
You are a traveler, and you have a wife that's been just supportive.
She's a champion. Yeah.
And she packs her bags at the least provocation, right?
And the funny thing is, when we went to Kenya, she'd never left Vancouver before that. So it was a big step for her.
That's a brave woman.
She is.
A brave woman. Well, so it seems to me now that I hear your story that writing would be a natural result of that because your experiences. I was just thinking when you were talking about writing things that you didn't have experience with. A lot of writers write their experiences, so
Yes.
they're drawing from their own experiences or life experiences. But you took a different tact. You took the tact of going something you had no like real experience with. That's very brave.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my first three books, yeah, were based on somewhat experience, but also interests. I've got my PhD in counseling, so it involved counseling and that type of thing, helping people. I started an organization for refugees. We've helped 850 refugees coming through, and so my second book had to do with that. And so some of my books do come from experience, but I also love history. So a lot of my books are historical fiction books as well. So, for
That's just
example, the Crossmaker. I kind of
that's
look at the Crossmaker as my recovering my manhood because my first three were writing as a woman. And I said, I just got to recover my manhood. So I started writing historical fiction from a male perspective. And then I came back with a series called Salome, the Good Sister, uh,
yes.
basically the Virgin Mary's sister, Salome. And what's it like to grow up in a family where someone in your family kind of ruins the family reputation and you're trying to be the good one, but you also have friends that you want to connect with and fit in. And how do you do that? And so that whole historical Roman zealots, a lot of historical fiction just based on what do people go through in life. And I use my experience as a counselor to understand psychological sides of people and what they're going through.
You know, when we think of historical figures,
Yeah.
um, I don't think very many people think of in terms of modern um, conflicts or
Mm.
familial kind of situations. You know, we think of people in just their own little orbit, their own,
Yes.
like when we think of Christ,
Yeah.
um, it's not, we don't go, wow, you know, Jesus had a sister-in-law. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something that we, like most people sit down and discuss that, you know. I think when I watched Passion of the Christ,
Right.
um, one of the one of the scenes that really hit home for me was when he was building the table and his mother Mary comes in and
Yes.
is, you know, and he's kind of giving her a hard time. He's talking about the table, you know, and she's telling him, you need to wash up, you know, don't come to the table, you know, food's
Yep.
ready.
Yeah.
And so those kind of insights that we get from past historical figures are really important because that's, you know, that's how people still were. They still had the same,
Absolutely. There's cousins and nephews and nieces and all kinds of relationships that you're working through. Yeah.
and we never see it through that prism. So that's very very engaging, I think. And I love that you're putting it in that we don't see too much historical fiction from that era, I have
Yeah.
to say.
So, yeah, that's kind of my passion and my focus. And of course, there's romance involved in every book, and it's the whole gamut of human experience.
Well, you also another series you did was the Crossmaker series.
Yes.
And so that's set in the same time period, correct? Uh,
Right. So the Crossmaker is about a young man who grows up with Jesus in Nazareth as a carpenter. He gets hired by a Roman centurion to build crosses, and his father is murdered by Barabbas. So he makes a special cross for Barabbas, goes out to watch Barabbas get crucified, and Jesus is carrying his childhood friend is carrying the cross. So The whole,
Oh, I
again,
just
Romans, zealots, all that.
I just got chills on that one. That's like an amazing um, triangulation there. I hadn't even thought of that at all.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Oh my goodness. And so when you did the book, so on your trilogies, they're beginning, middle, and end. You don't have any pre-books for those, or you're not thinking about and a sequels after that. They are done in themselves. That's it.
Yeah, well, the Crossmaker actually has a fourth book to it. So the first series is totally about the Crossmaker and the Centurion. The second one is because he's a crossmaker, of course, the zealots are trying to kill anybody who's helping the Romans. So
Right.
the second book is called The Crossmaker's Guardian, and it's about a man who's um, assigned to look after the crossmaker and make sure he stays alive to build these crosses.
Oh,
The third one is called The Crossmaker's Champion, and it's about a slave who used to belong to the crossmaker but is taken by the Romans and made into a gladiator as a way to keep the crossmaker focused on his job because they control this slave that he really appreciated. And then the fourth one picks up on that crossmaker's champion. He becomes a champion gladiator, and he is actually a Persian, and it's called the Prince of Persia. So it's his journey to find his roots, who he is, his identity, all that type of writing in Persia as a Prince of Persia. And he comes from,
I saw that book as kind of a um, just a little for the audience. So I put together some mock-ups for Jack, and I get to see all the book covers and things that he's doing. And so the trilogy is one thing, and then there was a separate book for the Prince of Persia. And I was wondering if that was part of that section.
yeah, and there's two more that are still being edited and coming into publication. So that's another trilogy that builds on the first trilogy.
Well, and then you segue, or you've I wouldn't say way, but you've changed your tune a little bit on these
Yeah,
out of the Jesus era, the ancient civilization types scenarios,
yeah.
to the Katie Delaney trilogy, and that's set in modern day, isn't it?
Yeah, that is modern day. That was the very first trilogy that was based on my experiences in Kenya, coming
Okay.
back through my daughter's eyes. So that was modern day. So that was the first one I started with. Then I went ancient. And so I go back and forth. I have another book for modern day parents called 12 Tasks. When we were in Kenya, we had our children, because they have rites of passage in Kenya. We had no rites of passage. So we created these rites of passage with 12 tasks that parents could do, building on 4 strengths, 4 growth areas, and 4 relationship building tasks that you could do to build, orient your adolescent towards adulthood in the time of, when they were changing from children to adulthood. So that's a book that helps parents orient their kids, and it's a how-to book.
You know, that is so needed these days because I was just having this conversation with my daughter. Um, my grandkids, my grandson's 15, and my granddaughter, oh gosh, she'll kill me if I get it wrong, but she's 12.
Yeah.
And none of the kids really have that kind of, and I don't think the parents have it either. I think well, me older, we had a very specific rules and regulations, and society was pretty much lockstep with our parents. Like if your parent was considered lenient, everybody wanted to go to that house because nobody else had a
Yes,
parent like
yes,
that.
yes. Understood that. Yes. Yeah,
So we all were raised with a pretty much set of rules, and it has changed dramatically. Um,
yeah.
you know, kids'
Agreed.
bedtimes aren't set at a specific time, and dinner time is not specific, and even language. My grandson asked me one day, he goes, Grammy, was it hard for you not to sass back to grandpa? I said, no, because there wasn't a choice.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. There wasn't that choice. Yes.
There wasn't a choice. So um, that's it. That to me would be a very, um, really, really good book to get out to parents that are struggling with, how to, because they don't want to not be their kid's friend, and they don't
Yeah,
want their child not to like them.
right. And it's cross cultural because I just took 50 of those books out to Rwanda. There was a whole women's group I had to speak to, and they all wanted copies. And then some friends in Brazil have ordered copies to do it down in Brazil. Got people in the States, people in Canada. So it's a cross cultural piece because you know your own strengths and weaknesses of your child, develop your own growth areas. My son has done it with his three of his sons. He's done the 12 tasks with them. But my daughters, who both had to go through it, they didn't appreciate it as much. And they've their kids are great, but they've raised them with not strict 12 tasks. They have almost the
Yep.
rule thing that you had going on, but their
Yep.
kids are great.
I know it depends. I mean, it depends on the child, and it depends. My daughter and I did have this discussion actually today, and it's about a lot of times parents, when the child is a baby,
Yeah,
infant, growing to a toddler, and then a little, 4, 5, 6, we always think we have to be there for them all the time. But as they grow, we think, oh, they're fine.
yeah,
They can dress themselves, they can get to school, or at least we got to school on our own. They have chores. Um, but what people are forgetting is that the child may be tall, maybe even, growing, looks like a person, walking, talking, a
yeah,
grown person, but their emotions and their minds are not mature enough, and they
right.
don't know enough to make correct decisions. And when we step away from them and we let them make their own decisions on things that they shouldn't, um, then it becomes frustrating for that adolescent.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
they don't, they, out of their frustration, they make choices that aren't correct. And parents feel like, okay, well, the kid's fine now, he's 14. Well, a 14-year-old boy needs guidance, and they need boundaries,
Yes. Yeah.
and they need to know what's going to happen if this happens. And to put them out by themselves and let them find out for themselves is why I think we have so many kids. It's with depression because they feel alone, they feel isolated.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
our society has kind of switched where the children have the say on what's going to happen, and the parents have to go along with it. Our whole culture has changed where the child is the authority rather than the parent now.
and it's not good. And I'm glad you came out with a book like that. When I wrote my book, I just wrote a book that I wanted kids to read. I
Hmm.
didn't have really a social agenda. Except I wanted kids to learn to read and understand what they were reading,
Right.
and introduce them to new words, and have see relationships that are like, it's a man and his dog, and they meet other
Hmm.
dogs, they meet other people, and having a dialogue and a relationship. Because the kids they're going from A to Z without the inside.
Yeah. Absolutely true. Yeah.
And it's frustrating because I told my daughter, I said, I'm 60 years old and I'm still working on stuff. I can't
Hmm.
imagine if I was 15
Yeah.
being bombarded with all the stuff that we do today in these days and not know how to fix it or how to deal with it. So the book is both for girls and boys, or do you have it
Yes.
like
Yes.
certain?
There is a novel, an accompanying novel called "The Task of Manhood" for So the main book, How To, is for boys and girls, and it's called The 12 Tasks. But there's a
Okay.
novel that just takes a novel form of one father and son who work with other fathers and sons to go through it. That's the task of manhood, and I'm finishing the task of womanhood as a novel to go along with that. So there's accompanying young adult um, language novels to go with the main tasks, just so they get an idea of what it looks like worked out in a fun story way.
So are these books good for just the parents to read, or are there sections where the adolescent can read that, the young teen?
Yeah. So the 12 tasks manual is designed for the parents to, it's a how to, and you work through it with the child because you work out which tasks you're going to do with them. The novel can be parent read or child read. It's age appropriate for adolescents.
Okay.
It's an adventure novel, so it just
You know,
gives them an idea.
I just spoke to another indie author who was asking me about publishing his book and information, and he writes books for boys.
Yeah,
And he said he was really surprised when he went to the bookstore how few books there are for boys.
yeah,
All of the authors, he tried to get it published through a traditional publisher, and they said there was no interest in it.
yeah,
And I said, well, why, just publish yourself, because you know, I don't want to wait for anybody myself, but the boys need that. They need to start um, being able to read and find subjects and reading material that they can connect with. And I know it's harder because they have a different boys and girls are different, so
yeah,
their interests are different. But like if you wrote a book for young boys about Africa, that's an
yeah.
exciting thing, for
Yes,
them.
yeah. My co-author on the 12 tasks does that. He writes exclusively for mainly boys in an African setting. You know, he has Ragendo rhinos and all kinds of, the
Things
tribal.
going on.
Yeah, so his specialty is that.
But yeah, it's sad that the boys don't have are not introduced in this particular time period to more books.
Yeah,
So I'm glad to see that they're being addressed, and it's helpful because um, we've got to get the kids um, more educated about themselves and about how to function in society, and we can't leave that to just letting them hang out and figure it out from another child.
yeah. No, that's what kids are left to figure out for sure. Yeah.
You never want to cheat on a test. I was never a cheater on a test because I was like, okay, that dude doesn't get really good grades. Like you don't want
You
to
didn't.
cheat on the kid that's not the best kid in
No,
the
you
class.
didn't. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good analogy of what's happening in our culture.
Yep. So, so you are where are you now? You said you've got one book's in editing, or two books in editing.
Yeah, one's being printed this week. I've got two books in editing that are being published as soon as the editing's done. Two more that are in waiting. So that's kind of what's on the agenda right now.
And do you have okay, so when did you start indie writing?
Yeah. When did I
Writing,
start?
I mean, your first book was published by a publisher, but how many
Yeah.
books have been published by traditional and how many are indie books?
I've done hybrid with a few of them. So my like the Good Sister trilogy is a hybrid model where um yeah, anyway, if your viewers know anything about hybrid publishing, I've done that. Six books were with a publisher. Six of them are hybrids. I've got friends in Africa who have a publishing house as well who have done 3 of my books. One of my books won a contest, so it was published because of that. So all my books are published different ways, and
So now
yeah,
are you attempting to just go straight indie, or are you still
yeah.
looking?
So now I am looking because the indie can I can manage it better.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
when I was speaking to the gentleman about that, I went through to the viewers. He's talking about like vanity publisher. So
yeah,
you pretty much they print the book for you and they do some formatting and things like that. But basically, you're still writing the book, and they don't usually advance you money. A
yeah,
lot of
right,
times on the vanity ones, you have to pay actually to have your book published,
for sure.
and you have to pay to have it marketed. So what I've noticed in the last, I started writing like 6 years ago, and I did vanity through my first book. And once I got through that process, I realized I actually did the book myself,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I paid them, and all of the main like Simon and Schuster and HarperCollins, all of the traditional publishers right now all have vanity publishers
they do.
because you're paying for it. They don't have to give you an advance. They don't have to shell out any money. And but they control a lot of the book if you get it done, you know, traditionally. But
Yeah,
as an indie author, I don't I when I do an edit, like if I was to do an edit for you, I don't want to change your story. I don't want to change the way you say something
right,
because it's your character,
right.
it's your story. And sometimes you'll get an editor, like I turned my book into an editor one time and it came back, it wasn't my book.
Hmm.
I was like, they said, well, the sentence structure. I'm like, but it's a dog.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
The dog's not going to have correct sentence structure, you
yeah,
know? The
yeah,
pilot is not going to have, he's not going to be speaking the King's English. He's going to be talking like a pilot. So when indie authors ask me about this, I'm like, look, nowadays you can get your own ISBN number, which is
yeah.
how they know what book it is. That's how
Right.
they, and it's very important because it's kind of your little copyright. It says this is what you did and this is your book.
Yeah,
And no one else can have that particular book but you. Um, and you can print your book, you can publish a book yourself, and you can write the book that you want to write. And I
yeah,
think you're probably finding that's much easier for you to do what you want.
yeah. So you're managing and controlling your own dream, and then it's likely to stay the way you want it to. Yeah.
Yes. And he, again, if someone says to you, well, Jack, no one, I don't know anybody that wants to read it. I'm one person and I'm sitting in an office, right? And I just say, well, I look at this book and it's nice, it's good, it's got a good story, and it's got great characters, and it's got a great theme, but I don't think anybody's going to buy it. Well, how the
Hmm.
heck do they know?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you know, a New York bestseller, a lot of times they're a New York bestseller because the author has written, there's a Jodi Picoult or you know, um, one of the, now of course my mind's gone, but one
yeah.
of the really famous authors that are out there, the formulaic authors that write the same book,
Yes.
they're already a bestseller because they were a bestseller 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But the book world isn't as cut and dried as that, as you and I both know now that we've
Mm,
kind of been doing it.
it isn't. You can manipulate your categories to get first, you know, uh, bestseller. You can do all kinds of things to get bestseller status, and yeah, it's true.
The idea, I think, is that we want people. I always say that everybody's got a story, and it should be told
Yeah.
somewhere around, like, going back to the Crossmaker and the Salome trilogy.
Yeah.
That's an aspect of Christ
Hmm.
that I don't think anybody thinks about.
No, no. It's it's my own mind, it's my own story, but it's if you can't help but write, you got to write.
I know, and there are I have done manuscripts that I was like, wow, this person is not a writer. It's got a great story, but the words don't come in a good way. So even if you have a great story, find someone who can write your story for you. Don't
Yes. True.
don't let your story go if you don't feel like you're the writer in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
yeah, there's
what
enough writers.
I know, and the other thing I always bring up with my writers is there's a book, um, and no matter what you think of the content, I'm not fond of the content, but my daughter said, this book's hot, you should read it, and they made it into a famous movie, and I read it, the book, and I was like, okay, this is a horribly written book.
Hmm.
This book is horrible to read. It's terrible. And I'm not going to give it any. I'll tell you off camera what it was, but sometimes there's really no accounting for taste. It's a blockbuster. It was a blockbuster movie. Everybody went to see it,
Yeah.
and I was like, I could get past the first chapter because it was horrible. It was horribly written.
Yeah, and I had that experience at an airport where I picked up the number one bestseller because people were talking. I read the first few pages. I said, "This is atrocious writing. I can't read this. It's just not." And how does it get number one bestseller? They got a great agent. They've got great promotion. They've got a big promotion machine behind it, and you can sell
Yep,
anything that way.
yep. And I think that we are hopefully going back to a little bit where we're getting out of um, the warehousing of books and material, and people will hopefully. I mean, we have Kindle and we have all the electronics and stuff. I still like a book. I still want to hold a book.
Me too.
The kids would rather be on a Kindle, but we have those options. But it's still a person like Mark Twain and Thoreau and all of the famous authors, um, of the past, um, Emily Dickinson, and
Yeah,
all of them, David, they all wrote their own books. They were writers, and they didn't
absolutely.
have the machine that we have today with the publishing houses. So I think it's good that we're kind of going back a little bit and being able to publish our stories. Um, so your book, The Marriage Ministry and Marriage Collide, that one is the one that's coming out
Yeah, it's
directly.
being printed right now, and so it should be out next month. Yeah,
And where do you have a website, or do
I
you sell?
have a few websites. One is just jackataylor.org, which is my historical fiction, like Katie Delancey trilogy, the Crossmaker trilogy, Salome trilogy, those type of things. The When Ministry and Marriage Collide will be on my marriage counseling or marriage coaching website, which is oneheartcoaching.com.
Okay.
The 12 tasks is on 12tasks.org. So any books can be ordered off those sites.
Okay. And are all your books still in print?
Uh, Good question. I think so.
Think so? Are they
Probably I need to pay attention to the Katie Delancey because it was 2011, 12, and 13. So the publisher just let me know, do you want to keep this in going? I said yes. So hopefully it's still up there. You
and
can get it
are
on
they,
Amazon anyway.
it's on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, if
Okay,
nowhere
so
else.
you got Amazon as well. Um, so what do you What's your next travels? Do you have travel plans? Are you going to sit at home for a while and write, or what's your plans?
Uh, Coming up, I'm heading to Alaska again, looking at some possible writing adventure for that. I'm heading back to Rwanda in a few months to do more teaching there. Um, Other than that, it's local. Next week, I'm off camping. We have 50 of us from our family who are gathering.
Goodness.
All the cousins get together. My mom started this 50 years ago, where everybody in the family gets together for a week camping and connects again. So we're doing that. My wife has
That
taken over
that
that.
sounds much better than like a family reunion with really bad potato salad and
Yeah,
burgers.
yeah. No, this is great. We have great food and great fun.
Do you do it up in? It's up in Canada.
Yeah, it's just an hour from here. It's on a lake, same place. So we go for a week and connect, and it's great.
That's awesome. Before we go, I should have asked this earlier, but of course my brain I start uh, talking and getting ahead of myself. But um, for new authors who
Mm,
are working through their books, do
yeah.
you have um, a way of? Do you have like a procedure? Do you have like if you get like if I say, Jack, I want you to write a book about this. Does it take you a while? I know you got to do research and things like that, but what's your process?
Depends on the book. Like, for example, the 12 tasks, I storyboarded the whole thing chapter by chapter and then wrote it out that way. The historical fiction, I tend to be a pantser, what they call, where you get the character in your head and you have an initial inciting incident, and then he tells me what the story is going to be, or she tells me what they're
Oh,
doing, what they're saying, who they're interacting with, and I'm writing as fast as I can to keep up with what they're doing, and I'm crying, I'm laughing, I'm engaged in this story, just trying to capture it. But I kind of live the story through the character, and so on my historical fiction, I'm very much a pantser, just let it unroll as it unrolls. And then of course, you go back and you edit and fine tune everything. But it starts from start to finish. And then I know it's just, they tell me it's done. I finish. And then the next adventure comes that we go through it again. So that's a pantser side in historical fiction. But some of them especially like the When Ministry and Marriage Collide, I'm very much you're researching, you're storyboarding, you're editing, and going back and forth. But
so because a lot of writers, they'll write and they'll say they're writing a book, and they get a writer's block, or
yeah,
they're stuck. And I think what you just mentioned is interesting because you really can't step out. You really have to enter into your character, no matter what it is.
yeah,
So you can't just write about that character. You have to be that character at that
exactly.
moment.
Yeah, the deeper point of view you can get, the better for your reader. Now I'm still learning that. And so part of it is just capturing the story first through without stopping and thinking about it. And then you go back and you can deepen the point of view. You can adjust the scenery, the details, make sure there's consistency, get the editing done. But first is capturing the story, and you just have to run with it.
Have you ever got to the part where you actually went back into that character and it had to change the way that particular passage ended up being?
Uh,
Like you had written it one way
yeah,
and then you went back
yeah,
and you thought, I don't know. And then see, sometimes when you change one thing, it can change a lot It can.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm writing this book. Well, I've written the book, and it's one of the ones that are in editing right now. It's on Hatshepsut, Pharaoh Hatshepsut, who is the mother of Moses, the Egyptian mother of Moses. She's the most famous pharaoh of the new kingdom in Egypt. She discovers Moses while she's still a princess. Her father dies, her husband dies, she becomes the pharaoh. And so I'm writing this one, and you're doing heavy research on the gods of Egypt and how they work. But I'm doing this one thing where she's getting her body um, molded for statues, and
Okay.
so I'm trying to think how, in an audience that I'm writing to, how I write the story, but then I go back and say, maybe that's not. I have to leave that part out. It and
Yes,
I changed that character interaction a little bit, just but I captured the story first, and then I reviewed and thought, for my audience, is this section appropriate? I have to maybe adjust it a little bit, and it changed the interaction with that those two characters just enough. But it was just one chapter I had to change. The rest was okay. But yeah, I had to do it in that case just because I have to think about my readers.
exactly. Because
Who am I as an author? I thought of writing as under a pseudonym so that people would know it was me. But then I thought, I'll just
but
change.
that is really important. It's funny. A lot of people think it's easy to write a children's book, and it's actually not because
Hmm,
you don't. I don't want to pander to the child and make. It depends on the child's age and what their reading ability is. But when I'm starting to use words that I'm like, okay, I don't know that a 7-year-old is going to get that.
yeah,
And I don't know if that situation, I'm thinking if the parents are going to read that, is that something appropriate? So there really is a great deal of um, cross thought processes, no matter what your book.
right.
And if you're writing, if you're a Christian author, and you have um, situations that might tend to be a little bit more, um, you could go farther with them, but you think, well, my readers want to read this from this author.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it really is and when you're giving advice too, I think you're very brave
Mhm.
because you're advising people,
Yeah,
and so you have to go, okay, well, because you're putting I always tell people that it's a very intimate thing to be a reader of
yeah,
another person's work.
yeah. Very
And
true.
you're um, especially if you're writing, part of you comes out in that book.
True.
It doesn't matter if you're the pharaoh or you're the detective.
Yeah,
um, Little bits and pieces. So um, it's a brave world that writers are in, and
yeah. And they
you
say
are.
the best authors are working out their own issues in their books, right?
Yes.
They've got a question they're trying to resolve and they use their characters to help them resolve the issue. So the deeper and more authentic and honest they are, the better that book is.
Do you think that's part of why some people stop writing because um, they've written something and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't really want my parents or my
Yep.
siblings or my friends to know that I wrote this, because then they know that I must know about it.
Yeah. That's what pseudonyms are for. Yeah. Yeah.
Nom de plume.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I
So,
know,
but
and sometimes I'll read a book and I was like, wow, like I don't know if I could write that. I don't
right.
know. I don't know that I could put that in print. So I stayed safe, Jack. I went with kids' books because
Yeah. And I've done some kids books, and like I haven't published them yet. Like I've done one, when penguins go for walks. It's all about, when penguins go for walks, do they go for miles or blocks? Do they walk in shoes or socks?
I like
Yes.
that.
So it's, the whole thing is the ox. So it's, 15 pages of uh, little verses about when penguins go for walks. Do they do this? Do they? And it all rhymes with ox.
That's
So
awesome.
it's meant as a beginner reader for grade 2, 3, whatever. Just my grandkids like it. So I write children's books just for my grandkids, but I haven't marketed anything yet.
Well, I'll tell you, it's the thing about children's books. It's really actually harder to publish them, to print them.
Yeah.
If there's illustrations that cost more. Um, um, Amazon doesn't do hardbacks that are less than, like, I think 70 pages. So
Yep.
kids' books are smaller. So you have to go to another printer. And they just tend to be a little more expensive to produce than say a novel.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
um,
Do it.
let
Yeah.
me let me know, because I know how to do that. I'll help you with that.
I may be in touch with you. I've got it illustrated. I've got the thing, and
I
you can
I
take a look.
yeah, I love it. I like I said, I've got more books in my head. I'm doing other things, and so I really just want to write. I keep thinking, God, I want a book. I want to finish that book. It's in my head, but
Yeah.
oh my goodness. So Jack and you and I could talk forever about books, I think.
Absolutely.
I have so enjoyed this. I hope all
Thank
of
you.
the viewers have too. Jack is really, like, he's got the gambit of stories to tell, and his books are amazing. And I hope everybody takes the opportunity to check out his books. He will be on the Busy Bookstore, so you can find him there as well. We're going to load his books up and put him on there. But there's my dog. You can't see him, but he's the one in the picture, actually.
I knew there had to be a story. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he looks like a little rodent. I know. Um, a bull terrier.
Nice.
It's time for him to eat, and so he reminds me of that I
Mm.
haven't fed him yet. But anyway, Jack, I want to thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being on the show. Um, you brought a lot of insight and wonderful information. And like I said, any new writer or person that is in the midst of creating their book or getting ready to publish, you know, just get visions of Jack's. I don't know how many books you got total. 14.
I've got 17 that are done, and there's a few more in process, but yeah.
Okay, so we're talking double digits here. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
anyway, one more time, give your website before we go off.
So my main website is jackataylor.org. Or no,
Or
.com, jackataylor.com.
okay, perfect. And you can find his books Amazon and at his website. And we're gonna have to do this again, Jack, when your other books come out.
Awesome. That'd be great. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.